Hey friends, I recently had someone ask me what my favorite game of all time was, and I couldn't pick one. There's too many good games. And I responded with, if I had to pick one favorite from every console, I could do that. And that's what this video is. I'm going to go through my favorites from every console I have and finish off with handhelds. So let's jump right in to the NES. My favorite game on the NES has got to be Bubble Bobble. I love playing this game on the NES. The remakes and additions on later consoles, all the way up to the Switch, as well as in the arcade. My runner up on the NES is Snake Rattle and Roll. Really cool 3D isometric platformer. Moving over to the Sega Master System. The Sega Master System does not have great box art or label art, but my favorite on the Master System is Quartet. Quartet is a side scrolling platformer with guns, and you shoot enemies. And there's a jetpack in every level, which is pretty fun. My runner up on the Sega Master System is Rampage. Better than the NES version, probably the best way to play that original game. Moving over to the Super Nintendo, as many of you know, I love Yoshi. Yoshi's my favorite character of all time, hands down. So it's got to be my favorite Yoshi game, Yoshi's Island. Love the mold breaking of the flutter kicking on your jumps, as well as most levels not having a time limit, opening up for exploration, and really just enjoying the level and all its aesthetics, and not being forced to go through the game in 300 seconds or whatever the limit would be. Runner up for me on the Super Nintendo, Super Mario World. First time that we got to use Yoshi in a platforming game. Moving over to the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis has a lot more fast-paced games. You can see Sonic, of course, being faster than Mario in the way the games play, and no exception on a lot of their games, such as my favorite, Gunstar Heroes. Gunstar Heroes is a great running gun game. Treasure's first game. Treasure makes great games, as you guys probably know, and that's no exception right there. My runner-up on the Sega Genesis, Rocket Knight Adventures. Gotta have a platforming game in there for me. I love my platformers, and Rocket Knight Adventures throw some cool additions in there with the rocket aspect of the platforming. Some of the levels are more shoot 'em up based, with using your rocket to go through those levels, and having a weapon is great to go through and kill enemies that way. Moving over to the N64. My favorite on the N64 has got to be Rocket Robot on Wheels. It's kind of a misnomer because he only has one wheel, but it's plural in the title. Very fun 3D platforming collectathon, which is very common for that area, but a very well done game. Kind of a lesser known game as well. And my runner up on the N64 is a weird one, Rush 2 Extreme Racing. Not because of the racing, but because of the stunt mode. Being able to go through and do as many flips and rolls as possible to get combos and high score is a lot of replayability and competitiveness for multiplayer. Moving over to the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn, very expensive to collect for, so of course you gotta have some Japanese games that are cheaper. X-Men vs. Street Fighter is my favorite game on the Sega Saturn. I gotta have at least one Street Fighter game in the collection, and that's it for the biggest roster. I would prefer like a Marvel vs. Capcom, but those games are also very expensive, so I had to settle for X-Men vs. Street Fighter. And my runner-up on the Sega Saturn, NBA Jam. NBA Jam's a classic. The best way to play NBA Jam Tournament Edition is on the Sega Saturn. Best graphics, best audio, everything else is best on the Sega Saturn if you want to play some NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Moving over to the next generation with the GameCube. This is the first game that I've ever 100% completed, I believe, which is Pokemon Coliseum. 100% completion all the way up through getting Ho-Oh at the end and through Battle Mountain. And completely changing the mold of a Pokemon game, in a mainline game at least, and having double battles be the standard, and not having to go out in the wild and collect them all, but to go through and collect them from trainer battles is very interesting and a completely different spin on the game. And my runner-up on the GameCube is kind of a cheat, but the Zelda Collector's Edition, which is where I would play Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, and it also has the original NES games on there, which are very difficult. But that would be my runner-up on the GameCube. Moving over to the Sega Dreamcast. Of course, I love platformers, and especially if they're a bit different and do it well, and that's Super Magnetic Neo. This is a very cool 3D platformer, not as much open world as you'd think, but more like Crash Bandicoot style, going down a specific path. Really cool gimmick with the magnets and how that all works. as well. And my runner up on the Sega Dreamcast would be Toy Commander, kind of your childhood come to life, where all the toys in your toy room get to become something you play with and go through the levels and accomplish various goals, whether it be flying an airplane or driving a tank around and what have you. And lastly, for that generation, the PS2. The PS2 was the console that I primarily owned during that generation and fell in love with a lot of sports games that didn't hold the test of time, of course, because that's how sports games are. But my favorite game of all time on the PS2 is Onimusha 3. The Onimusha series is great. One is probably better than two, in my opinion, and there's Dawn of Dreams, which I'm undecided on at this point. But Onimusha 3 Demon Siege has a little bit of time travel involved, and it's hard to do well, and they seem to pull it off. Very, very good game for a hack and slash. If you like the Onimusha series, that's probably the best one. And my runner-up on the PS2, Tokobot Plus. This is a PSP remake to bring to console, and a game that I kind of found and fell in love with its platforming gimmicks of having bots and stacking them up and using them as a tool to climb or to use as a weapon in different ways. Very clever game, very fun game. Moving on to the next generation with the Wii. The Wii is a console, of course, everyone had. Opened up a lot of different gimmicks with motion controls, but one that was done really well was the Lego Batman series. A lot of the Lego series in general did very well, but Lego Batman in particular spoke to me because of the replayability and going back through and having more suits as Batman and Robin, but also going back through and playing as villains and doing things you couldn't do on the hero side. My runner up on the Wii, Kirby's Return to Dreamland. This is the first Kirby game I ever played all the way through and really got me going on the Kirby series. Moving over to the PS3, platformers, no surprise, the original Little Big Planet. The Little Big Planet series was very creative, very customizable, which was fun. It almost seemed like you were world building, and they did have, build your own levels in some of the games, which is a very fun game and really spoke to me. And my runner up on the PS3 is 3D Game Heroes. Basically, Pixel Zelda is what I would call it. Very fun game. Moving on to the next generation with the Wii U. Of course, you got to have your Yoshi game. This is basically Yoshi's Island, but better. The aesthetic is very cool with the Yoshis, the collectible different yarns, but also there's no Baby Mario to worry about. Baby Mario whining is that sound that just gets embedded in your brain from playing Yoshi's Island. If there was like a ROM hack that deleted that sound, would be awesome. A good way to play that game. And then my runner-up, Zelda Wind Waker. This HD version, I thought about playing Twilight Princess HD, but I kept it on the GameCube and played it that way because the enhancements really weren't there. But in Wind Waker HD, of course, you get the HD graphics, but you also get faster sailing. You have the gamepad to control your map, which is great. But just the best way to play Wind Waker. And Wind Waker is also a game that really inspired me to start doing side quests more. Most of my Zelda experiences are main quest, get through it, enjoy it, and move on that way. Moving over to the PS4. PS4 is really where I took my first-person shooter to the next level and played a lot, and that's where most of my hours on the PS4 come from. One of my favorite games. I've got hundreds and hundreds of hours on a lot of those games, but my favorite has got to be Diablo 3. Diablo 3, I'd never played the previous two until this, and I went back and played some, but Diablo 3 has a great storyline. I fell in love with playing as a wizard, and even in the seasonal play, got into some of the post-game activity and really grinded for leaderboards and really got hooked on different builds. Lots and lots of hours and lots of fun in that game. And the runner-up for me, of course, the Little Big Planet series, the third installment. Just redoing that same formula and improving on it, making it better. Just a great game. And then moving over to the Switch, maybe Game of the Year candidate, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby finally gets his 3D treatment. It's not your full 3D like some of the other 3D platformers out there. You're really limited to an isometric view and going through the levels in somewhat linear fashion. But the music was great. The abilities were great. The mouthful mode was great. The Ranger power up ability to be able to like take your abilities and improve upon them and make them more powerful. Just an amazing game. Can't say enough good things about it. Highly recommend you play it. And then my runner up, Super Mario Odyssey. It's a game I kind of slept on. I figured it was a Mario game. I figured it would be good, and I didn't play it until this year, and I had a ton of fun playing it. That's all my console favorites. So jumping over into handhelds, which is all Nintendo for me. I do have a PSP, but I use it more for my travel emulation device. So going through my Nintendo consoles, starting way back in the original, the first game I ever owned, Tetris. The original Tetris, to me, is so much better than the other Tetrises, purely because of the soundtrack. That original soundtrack speaks to me. The Tetris formula has gotten better. I think the Wii game of Tetris has a lot of cool game modes in it, and they've expanded that world a lot. But it's still that original music from the original Game Boy Tetris is where it's at for me. The second game I owned was Super Mario Land, but then Super Mario Land 2 did it even better with the open world. I shouldn't say open world, overworld map is what I'm trying to say, and being able to pick which levels you go to, go back and replay levels, those kind of things. Super Mario Land 2 and the six golden coins would be my runner up there. Moving over to the Game Boy Color, gotta have my Pokemon games. Pokemon Crystal was my favorite there, and it's kind of the best of both worlds because you get to play in the Johto region, you get to go back to the Kanto region in the post game, so it's kind of Gen 1 and Gen 2 all rolled up into one game. And of course, Crystal being the third installment in Gen 2 gives you the best of the Pokedex that way. Moving over to the Game Boy Advance, my favorite Zelda game, Minish Cap. Minish Cap is a game that I'm even thinking about buying digitally on the Wii U before the shop closes, just so I can have that way to play it easily and maybe even stream it again. Absolutely love Minish Cap. And runner up for me on the Game Boy Advance, Fire Red. I love the original Kanto region and the original Pokemon, of course. I used to collect Pokemon cards as a kid, so the original um, Gen 1 Pokemon are what speaks to me the most. Moving over to the DS era, my favorite, of course, being Pokemon Platinum. I think like the original Pokemon formula was mastered in Gen 4. Getting into Gen 5, they kind of did a soft reset, and you don't really have a lot of the Pokemon from the previous games. But in Gen 4, they kind of had that pinnacle of all the previous generation using Pokemon in that Pokedex. And my runner up, gotta have a platforming game on the DS, Legendary Starfy. There's actually Legendary Starfy games on the Game Boy Advance in Japan that never made it here, and I'm thinking about trying to get them, maybe someday. Moving over to the 3DS and the last console we'll look at today, Kirby Planet Robobot. Basically, imagine Kirby but with mechs, and the mechs are awesome. Lots of destruction, lots of fun. It's a little 2.5D, so you can go back and forth between the foreground and the background as you go through your platforming levels. But an amazing game. Probably my second favorite Kirby game. Used to be my first. And my runner-up on the 3DS, kind of a weird choice, but Pilot Wings Resort is such a peaceful game. If you're looking for something to do and just relax, enjoy some good music, some calming visuals as you fly around the island and do some challenges, just a great game. But tell me in the comments section, what are your favorite games? Do you agree with me on any of these? Did I completely sleep on your favorite game? Love to know your opinions. But I certainly will share with you mine as I go through series like this and talk about my favorites. And in a future video, I'd love to talk about the consoles and my experience and how I got to these favorites and how I grew up with video games. But look for future videos. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, check out some live streams, and thanks for watching. Have a great one.